and we were flying, the nurse, the pilot, myself, and the patient. We were all boarded this little small twin propeller plane, and we were flying from Suluk out to Winnipeg. My immediate reaction when I realized we were crashing was intense fear and panic. Like like a reflex. Instantly, I started feeling this force field of peace descending on me.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Dr. Yvonne Kason with us. She is the president of Spiritual Awakening International, and she's also had 5 NDEs. We're going to focus in on a few of them today and see how many we can get through. But I've been really excited to have you on, Yvonne. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me, Joe.
As we talked in the beginning, you've had a number of NDEs. There's a couple that really stand out, and we'll focus in on that. I always start each discussion though, really looking at, this is going to be interesting because you did mention some of your NDEs were when you were a child, but I try to go and look at Yvonne as a child. I try to get a little bit of information of who you were, the type of lifestyle you had at the time, because I try to see how kind of we got to where we're at today. So I kind of get a little info on how you were as a little Yvonne.
Sure. I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. And I think I had a pretty normal childhood, except my parents were both European immigrants. So when I was 5 years old, we traveled to Switzerland, which is where my grandparents lived. And we were traveling there by train, which was, unusual for me when I was 5 years old. And I was at a train station and with my parents, and I saw a station hand jump off the railway platform onto the tracks and go up on the next platform. And so as a little 5-year-old, I thought, oh, that looks like fun. And so I leaned forward to jump on the railway tracks, not realizing there was a train approaching the station. So actually at 5 years old, that is when I had my first near-death experience. And I'll just tell you quickly, because you asked me, what happened was all of a sudden, it was as if my life was a movie and somebody pressed the pause button, right? And it's like the pause button
Hmm.
was played. And I all of a sudden my point of perception jumped out of my body. I now know it was a near death experience. I didn't as a kid. And I was like maybe 20 feet up in the air. And my brain was still going, but the movie that was my life was now on pause. And I remember thinking, because I could see from when I was up in the air, the train that was going to hit me very shortly. And I remember I was not afraid at all. And I clearly understood what was going to happen. And I remember thinking, oh, I see. I'm going to be hit by a train, which I understood meant that I was going to be killed. And but there was no fear, no anxiety, this sort of very strange peace and almost like an adult understanding that I was about to be killed. And then all of a sudden, the pause button was released, and my movie of my life started moving forward again. And suddenly, I'm back in my body, and some gentleman from the train platform reached forward, pulled. I was just 5, I was just a tiny little kid, pulled me back onto the platform, and whoosh, the train pulled in front of me, and I was not hit by the train.
Wow.
Now, I now know that was my first near death experience. But as a kid, as 5-year-old, this was the summer before kindergarten, because I remember starting kindergarten shortly afterwards. And you make new friends, etc. And I remember very clearly making a new friend and saying to my new friend, guess what? I can fly. Because as a
Mm.
child, that's how I understood it. And what I now know was an after effect from the near death experience. I started having lots of out of body experiences as a child. Like I
Wow.
remember flying down my street and flying over the schoolyard and all that sort of stuff. And I guess as a child I didn't distinguish between what was out of body and what was other experiences because I had such clear memory of flying over the schoolyard. I thought I could fly. And I remember telling this little friend about this, and he laughed at me. He was a little boyfriend. He said, "Oh, you can't fly. And I said, yes, I can. I'll show you. And I remember so clearly, we had a little fence in front of our house. I climbed up on the fence. I spread out my arm like wings and I jumped off, planning to show him how I could fly
Oh
down the
no.
street and over the schoolyard. And of course, I couldn't. I fell to the ground. And I still remember so clearly to this day my reaction. I was confused. I couldn't figure it out. Like, why do I have such clear memory of flying and I can't show my friends? So my friend wandered off and laughed at me. So in that sense, my childhood was a little bit unusual, but I never labeled it as paranormal or spiritual or anything like that. It was just one of those weird things that happened to me as a kid. Right?
Right. Wow.
And then the other weird one was when I was 11. I had just turned 11. It was way before puberty, and I was still a kid. My family was in this really bad car accident. It was actually driving on the 401. We were heading out of Toronto going west, and we were had a very serious car accident. And they used to have very deep embankments over the side of the road. The car went down over and spun several times. And in the course of this accident, I sustained a serious head injury and I was unconscious for 3 days afterwards till I regained consciousness. And I've always had memory of floating above the accident scene and accurately seeing what was happening below. Like I later on, years later, talked with my father about what I observed when I was floating above the accident scene. And he confirmed that what I saw was absolutely correct. And then I also remember floating above my body when they brought us to the emergency department of the hospital, that it was like the ceiling of the emergency room had gotten transparent. And I was up there where the ceiling's supposed to be. And I'm looking down and I'm watching the doctors trying to resuscitate my body. And again, even as an 11-year-old, it never dawned on me that there was anything, quotes, paranormal about this. I just figured that's what everybody had happened to them when they were unconscious for 3 days. I mean, what do you know when you're a kid, right? And but interesting now as an adult, I look back and I realize I had a very strong after effect from this, which I now know was another near-death experience, but it was different this time. After that near-death experience, I could see spirits. I could see ghosts for almost a year. And I remember that very, very vividly. And I mean, they never did anything frightening or tormenting, but they just frightened me as a child, that I was seeing spirits in my house. And my parents, they didn't sort of take me seriously when I said I could see ghosts. They probably thought it was just, trauma from the car accident or
Right.
something. But we now know, many years later, and I've done many years as a medical doctor researching near-death experiences and other spiritual experiences. We now know that's a very common after effect after near-death experience, that people can see spirits and have mediumistic experiences. So anyway, so yes, my childhood was a little bit unusual because of those two experiences, but I never labeled them as anything unusual. So mostly I was like a fairly normal kid, gifted,
Wow.
went to medical school, became a doctor, and planned on practicing traditional medicine. But spirit had other ideas.
It's amazing. Well, I appreciate you talking about the two in the childhood, and I think I guess what I was trying to see too is some people tell me the religious backgrounds and things like that. If there was any type of religion in your family that you were around, did anything like that happen? Were you
Well, yeah, I was raised in the United Church of Canada, but these experiences didn't, to me as a child, in any way connect to my religious upbringing.
right? Okay, and
Yeah,
that's what I
yeah.
was trying to just kind of decipher. So you had these experiences, you try to share them with your friends. I say it all the time on my show that I would see colors before I'd go to sleep around people's heads. I would see people in my mind and I would see the colors and I would tell my mom, and this went on for years. And then when started telling my friends about it, they thought, "What are you talking about?" I'd be like, "That I thought that was a regular practice. After you brush your teeth, you go in and you see everybody's energies." And so I shut it down because they kind of it was looked at like it was strange, right? So here you are having these close calls, and you had a real experience that could have taken your life. And yet you're right. When people say, they say, well, didn't you question what was going on? Well, at 5 and 11, you're learning so many things in life that you could just think, well, this is just part of life. Everyone has this
Exactly.
happen.
And that's what I thought. It was like, okay, just another one of those new life experiences.
Right. Right. And then you went on and you obviously started, you got into your adolescence and young adulthood and you're getting your doctor's degree and you're going through the regular life, right? People either
Hmm.
have kids, they get married, all these different things. You're going through all this. And at some point we get to 26 when you're 26 years old, right? And this is one
Yeah.
of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
So at this point, again, before you tell us, those experiences when you're a kid, you're probably not thinking about those things because you're
No.
you're on to your life now,
Hmm.
and you're now,
Exactly.
yeah. So what happened at 26?
So at 26, I was a young doctor and I was finishing my residency training at the University of Toronto, and I was assigned to a community in Northern Ontario called Sioux Lookout. And on this day, I was assigned on a medevac with a medical evacuation by small airplane of a critically ill Native Indian woman. It was a small twin propeller plane called a Piper Aztec. And we were flying, the nurse, the pilot, myself, and the patient. We were all boarded this little small twin propeller plane, and we were flying from Sioux Lookout to Winnipeg to get her to the intensive care facilities there because her condition was more serious than we could deal with at the tiny Sioux Lookout Hospital. Anyway, what happened that day was as we were flying to Winnipeg, we flew into bad weather. It was March 27th, which is middle of winter in Northern Ontario. We flew into a blizzard. The inquiry afterwards say that they think the air filters of both of the propeller engines froze over one after
Wow.
the other, which means we had no engine and we were crashing. And if you ever wonder what it's like when a plane is crashing, trust me, you don't miss it. It's like the worst turbulence you ever imagined. The plane's going down, it's shaking like crazy. That I can clearly see out of my windows that both engines have stopped. The propellers are still. Pilot's trying to guide us. He's trying to guide us because it's heavily forested in Northern Ontario, but there are also a lot of lakes. So he was trying to steer us to do a wheels up belly landing on the surface of the ice of a frozen lake to avoid us instantly being killed when we hit the trees. Anyway, my immediate reaction when I realized we were crashing was intense fear and panic. Like it just like a reflex. And it just jumped out of my heart, not out loud, but it just like jumped out of my heart. Oh God, help, I'm going to die. A plea of panic. And I guess looking back, that was close enough to a prayer because that is when my near death experience started. It actually started before the plane crashed, as the plane was going
Wow.
down. And as soon as that plea came out of my heart, instantly, I started feeling this force field of peace descending on me. And it was literally like it was pushing down all the fear. And all of a sudden, I heard an inner voice, and I had never heard inner voices before this day. And it was a masculine inner voice. And it said, be still and know that I am God. I am with you now and always. And the vibration that came with those words is beyond my capacity to describe. I just felt the presence. I felt safe. I had no more fear. Plane hadn't crashed yet. We were still going down. Anyway, the pilot very heroically did manage to do sort of a guided skid crash across the surface of a semi-frozen lake. We would have been okay if the ice had been thick enough to support our plane, but it wasn't. And once the plane came to a stop, stopped sliding, it nosedived very rapidly and sank into very deep water. So we had to get out of the plane while it was rapidly sinking. The nurse, the pilot, and I did our best to get the patient out, but we were not able to. She went down with the plane. And then I found myself, so this is the middle of winter in Canada. I'm wearing a heavy parka, heavy boots. I'm in a lake in very deep water. The closest land was about 200 yards away, and there was open, fast-moving water between me and the closest land because we had crashed at a place called Devil's Gap on Lake of the Woods by Kenora. It's actually called that, Devil's Gap, because of the fast-moving current. It's treacherous in winter and in summer, so there's no ice there. I would have to swim the Devil's Gap in these heavy winter clothes in the middle of the storm in winter, sub-zero weather, in order to get to shore. And the voice says to me, swim to shore. Now, I remember clearly I'd never had these types of, I'll call it now, higher guidance experiences before. I have since, but that was my first time this lifetime. And I remember mentally, I argued with this voice. I went, I'm not going to swim to shore. I took lifeguarding. They told you in a boating accident, you're not supposed to try to swim to shore. You're going to drown if you try to. And I'm arguing with this voice. So instead, I'm trying to get on the ice. And of course, the ice was too thin. And the voice repeats, swim to shore. So finally, the third time it said swim to shore, I started that long and really difficult swim to shore. And I went under several times as I was swimming. But each time I went under, I just, with all of my human strength, was pulling myself, struggling to get my mouth above water again so I could get some air in my lungs. And part way to swimming to shore is when my near-death experience deepened. That's the term we currently use. And what happened was all of a sudden, and I'm still swimming, I'm still alive, I'm part way to shore. I hear this loud sort of roaring noise, like the roar of a waterfall. It's like, and with that roaring noise, suddenly I feel my consciousness whisked up out of my body. And there I am about 20 or 30 feet above my body. But it's more complicated than that because it's actually like my consciousness was two places at the same time. Like the split screen TV where, you have two images, a little one and a big one. So the little image, a little bit of my consciousness was still in my body that was like desperately trying to swim to shore. But the big image, most of my consciousness was now up above my body. And then I rose higher and I rose into this incredible, hard to put the words, realm, state, place that was filled with beautiful, glistening white light. And the most incredible and outstanding feature of where I found myself was not the light, though. It was what I felt. It was the love. I felt such powerful, beautiful, incredible, unconditional love. For a second, I saw a little face of white sort of in the periphery. Then it sort of faded into the cloud like surroundings. And I didn't hear a voice explaining things or telling me things. It was different. It was more like my soul just knew things, or I don't know if I was remembering them or how I knew, but suddenly I just knew things. And in this white light love, I knew somehow that the love that I was experiencing was the love of the higher power, or what I had been raised to call God.
Hmm.
And what I was actually experiencing God to be was not at all like what I thought it was from my religious upbringing. It
Right.
was it was not an old man with a long white beard sitting on the throne judging me, have I been good or bad? What I was actually experiencing was the higher power, what I call God, was this incredible infinitely vast, like force field presence of love, profound, profound love, and
Mm.
infinite intelligence, and infinitely present and permeating all of creation and non-creation and all dimensions and past, present, future, all of it. It's just I understood that. I got it. That was the nature of our higher power. And I also somehow knew that what I think of as me would live on, whether that body that was struggling to swim to
Mm.
shore made it to shore or not, that me would live on. And I remained in this incredible realm state of love, of bliss, of feeling home where I belonged until I'm going to cut the story a bit short for you. I eventually managed to swim to shore. There was a whole series of coincidences, if you believe in them, that led to our rescue. I was flown by helicopter to the closest hospital, which was in Kenora. I watched from above as they landed on the driveway, wheeled out gurneys, put me on a gurney, brought me in the hospital, diagnosed me as profoundly hypothermic. I was below the bottom reading on the thermometer they were using. And they decided to reheat my body to resuscitate me in the hot water of the whirlpool baths in the physiotherapy department. And so
Wow.
when I was in the hot water in the whirlpool baths, is being reheated, is when I felt my consciousness re-enter my body. And what that felt like was how they depict a genie being sucked into a bottle. It's like I'd been at this big, expansive place up above, and then suddenly, whoosh, through the top of my head, I was sucked back into the tiny confines of my body. But then I knew I'm back. I'm going to live. I'm going to live. And that was my first adult near death experience, and it changed the course of my life.
Oh, I can imagine. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's an expansive one. And here you are as a medical doctor, which it's funny as I get to know more people and talk to people who are in the medical fields and who've had these experiences, they start to see that there's kind of like I'm enjoying watching kind of both things come together. I'm seeing that more and more,
Mhm.
because a lot of people in the past with science and medical literature, it was all, I don't want to say it had like an atheist point of view,
Well, they did.
but it kind of would be. Yeah, it
It
was more
would.
of
Yeah,
a,
100%. Hmm.
yeah, like
Hmm.
just a biological entity. This is it. Now, yes, the body, yes,
Hmm.
is only able to survive for a certain amount of time. The vehicle can only be taken care of for so long. But now we're seeing that there's two pieces of who we are coming together, right? And what you're saying,
Hmm.
stating that the me would live on. I'm gonna just before we get into the next thing. So because you've shared a few NDEs so far, I had a few questions for you, if that's okay.
Hmm.
Back when you were talking first about, I believe it was the train. You were 5 years old, right?
Yes.
Life had paused, you said.
Yeah.
So life had
Yeah.
paused. And this
Hmm.
could also relate to the one that happened at 11.
Hmm.
Do you feel in your heart then when people get in, you hear someone lost so and so to a really bad car accident, they hit a tree, all these types of things. I'm starting to feel this just from people I talked about. I'm curious about your answer to this. Do you feel that before the actual incident occurs, there's a transformative experience that happens within us so that we see it coming? Meaning you don't have to experience maybe the pain the same way, possibly. I don't know. I'm wondering because in your
Yeah.
instance, you said everything paused even before something could happen. Same with when you're in the accident, you kind of rose above the body as things were happening. So I'm just wondering about that.
Well, I don't think there's a very simple answer to that. I think there are many possibilities. I can tell you that I have no memory of pain from the car accident when I
Mm.
was in a coma for 3 days afterwards. Um, my most recent near-death experience, which we haven't gotten to yet, I'll just tell you about this aspect of it because it answers your question, is I had a slip and fall accident in 2003 in Niagara Falls. I slipped on black ice, hit my head on the rock cobblestone pavement, had a serious traumatic brain injury, brain hemorrhage, and died. Now, for almost a year, I had a powerful near-death experience. I was clinically dead for a period of time. We'll go into that later. But I will say for a period of time afterwards, I'm not sure anymore because my memory was not 100% clear for some time after the head injury. But for a certain period of time after it, although I remembered the near death experience very, very clearly, like very, very clearly, I remembered the near death experience. I had no memory of any pain at the moment of impact. So if you would have asked me during that time period, did you have any sensation of pain at your moment of impact? I would have said, no, I didn't. You know, my awareness jumps immediately to my near death experience. However,
Right.
a year or so later, I went to a sacred site in Ontario called the Peterborough Petroglyphs. I don't know if you know that site or not, but it's a sacred site with petroglyph images and has a very powerful spiritual energy. And I've often had powerful spiritual experiences there. And when I went to the glyphs, this was a year or so after my head injury, where I had died for a period of time, I saw an image on soul retrieval. And it was the explanation sign was, you know, here's a shaman helping the disciples by retrieving soul fragments that are off in the ethers. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if I have any soul fragments off in the ethers, like why I would have this thought, but I did. And sure enough, when I went and meditated afterwards, all of a sudden I got a piece of memory back that had been blocked, forgotten, maybe lost in the ethers. All of a sudden, I remembered what it felt like when I hit my head.
Oh,
And what it felt like was like an axe chopping into my head, like it was a severe pain, like just for a second. But then it was like a second or millisecond after I felt that pain, whoosh, my spirit was whisked out of my body. Now, you might think, oh gosh, that's an awful memory to remember the pain of having hit my head. But in fact, it was very healing to me because it was like, oh, there was this piece that was missing in my memory. And now that it's back, even though it's a very, very painful memory, it was like I felt more whole. It's like now I remember more completely what happened. So it hurt for a millisecond, and then when I was whisked out of my body, there was no pain. So maybe some people don't have any experience of pain. Some people have an experience of pain that goes away quickly. Or maybe they have experiences of pain that the good Lord takes the memory away so they don't
right.
remember it. So all
Yeah.
of the above are possible.
Yeah, I was just curious just because I have had so many people tell me that before their accident they actually witnessed the accident itself from above or and it just seems like it's a very constant thing I hear. That's not to say people don't experience the pain, but that's interesting. So your parts of the memory came back later about the
Yes.
actual pain you experienced. But even like you said, that pain did hit, but it was in such an incredible amount that you decided to, I'm not going to endure this. I'm going to jump out. At this
Well,
point,
that's not how I experienced it. It was I was taken out. It was a
okay.
force greater than myself whisked my spirit out of my body. This was not me doing anything. Like the
Oh,
memory is very clear. A force greater than myself whisked my soul out of my body, and it was like it was carrying me up to the light. It was, mhm.
yeah, and it's interesting because you said you hadn't done it. You mentioned in the plane that you had the when you were swimming and everything, you knew that the me would live on, the me that was you would live on. Yet,
Yeah.
yet in that moment you knew that, but when we're here, the vast majority of us do not recall that me.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the, like I told you, that plane crash near death experience changed my life. That was one of the ways that it really, really changed my life was that after that, and I mean, I was only 26, but I was absolutely certain that I would live on after my physical body dies. But not only was I certain I would live on, I was certain everyone lives on after our physical body dies. And it wasn't a belief that I'd read in a book. It was something I experienced. So to me, it was an absolute truth.
Wow.
And so it was very impactful. And it stays to this day. I have no fear of death. In fact, I've had 5 near-death experiences. I know it's much nicer on the other side.
Right, right.
We're down here to learn and grow, and there's a lot of challenges with learning and growing.
Why do you feel that we forget? Why do you think we come here and we have amnesia?
Well, I think it's part of the divine design. For whatever reasons, it's in the divine design that we don't remember all of our past incarnations. In my most recent near-death experience, for example, the one I started telling you about in 2003, one of the things that happened on the other side is I did remember all my past lives, like all at once, like this massive memory came back to me. And I think most people we don't incarnate with that by this, loving, intelligent, divine design because it helps us to focus on the here and now, the lessons we have to learn now. Like if
Right.
you can imagine being in kindergarten and given all of your books and learning up to the end of university, you'd be sort of like overwhelmed with all of this. But if you're just giving it little bit by little bit, okay, now we're going to focus on grade 1 math. Now we're going to focus on grade 1 spelling. It's more manageable. So I think there's a beautiful intelligence in that. Now, when it's going to be helpful for people's learning and growth, and if people are in a spiritual awakening process, I have seen it very often that people will start remembering past lives. And when they do start remembering past lives, it's often in a way that's helping them understand some difficulty that they're having right now in this incarnation. Because the learning point is right now. It's not about going back and learning what you should have learned 10 lifetimes ago. It's about, okay, if there was a lesson there, what am I going to do right now where
Right.
I'm going to handle it better?
Okay, that makes complete sense. I wanted to also before we get into that the most recent NDE. I know you're the president of the Spiritual Awakening International, right?
Mhm.
And I wanted to get a little bit of information because one of the reasons I really wanted to get this episode out is because I believe you're holding a conference and I wanted to get your
Yes.
information on that earlier on so that people can find out about it.
Sure. Yeah. I'm the president and CEO of Spiritual Awakenings International, and we are an online organization that I founded with Robert Bear back in 2020. Yes, we're a COVID baby. So, so we have all online events, and we're focused on raising awareness about all kinds of spiritual awakenings that are happening, not just the near-death experience, but other things, mystical experiences, out of body experiences, Kundalini awakening, past life recall, all the different ways, UFO transdimensional experiences, all these different types of spiritual awakening experiences people are having. And we're having our annual conference, our fifth annual conference. It's our 5-year birthday in June. So we are holding our online conference Saturday and Sunday, June 7th and 8th, and it's free. People can register at our URL, special URL, which is spiritualconference.org. That's spiritualconference.org. And it's free. We're a donation based organization, and we are delighted to have 40 speakers from at least 12 countries speaking at the conference. And Spiritual Awakenings International has grown so much since we launched it 5 years ago. We have subscribers in 107 countries around the world. So we're absolutely delighted. And I'm going to be speaking at the conference on Saturday, June 7th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on newest near-death experience discoveries. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Wow. That sounds amazing. And like I said earlier when we first started talking, I'm like, that's up my alley. I'm going to take a look at this. So that's why I wanted to get the information out. So I really appreciate you doing that and sharing it. So you said it was spiritualconference.org.
Is the URL is spiritualconference.org. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. That's great. And okay, so let's talk about the most recent one.
Yeah, I was at Niagara Falls, 2003, visiting it with a friend. And I'm going to start at the beginning.
Sure.
I was I love to go to Niagara Falls. I consider it a power place on the planet, and the spiritual vibration there is beautiful. I live not too far from it. And one of my favorite things to do there is to go down at the platforms at the base of the falls where there's the roar of the waterfalls and to meditate there. I like the tunnels underneath too. And I would do that every time I would go to Niagara Falls, which was usually a few times a year. And so that evening, this was November the 8th, 2003, I was standing at the base of the falls, meditating and holding the railing there, looking at the falls, feeling the vibration, which reminds me of the Om vibration that you can hear inwardly when you go very deep in meditation. And I had this profound, deep, deep, deep meditation where I finally merged with the other side. I reached this state of union. It's like my consciousness opened and I was in this state of mystical union. And I was able to see the other side, the astral realms, as well as this side at the same time with my eyes open. And I saw a being a light, a saint from my spiritual tradition. It was Mahavatar Babaji in his light body appeared and telepathically spoke to me and said, "Welcome home."
Wow.
And I had no idea I was about to die 2 hours later. So you had asked me, another one of your questions was, did something happen before the experience? So yeah, something happened before the experience, but I had no idea I was about to die 2 hours later. And I remained in this state of expanded consciousness, feeling peace, feeling home, feeling one with the divine, until I had my slip and fall accident. 2 hours later, we were eating dinner at the restaurant overlooking the falls. After dinner, walked out to the falls again. I slipped on black ice. The temperature had dropped. The mist had frozen. I slipped on black ice, fell back, hit my head on the rocky pavement, and instantly died. Had a brain hemorrhage, traumatic brain injury,
Wow.
lacerated both my frontal lobes. Anyway, a force greater than myself instantly whisked my spirit out of my body, and I found myself being rushed up through the dark evening sky. Some people might call it a tunnel. I didn't actually see a tunnel, but it was sort of darkness around me. And I could only was aware of my body down below in Niagara Falls just for the first second or so. But after that, my awareness was all focusing upwards on where I was being brought to. And I was being brought to, it was like a portal, like an entrance, illuminating light in the darkness to this white light realm. And I knew where I was going. So, no trepidations about it. And just there I was, and welcoming me in the entranceway, so to speak, of the white light realm were two beings of light, two saints who I recognized immediately. They were saints from my tradition. It was Paramahansa Yogananda and Mahavatar Babaji. And they telepathically communicated with me so that I instantly understood that my physical body had died and that my incarnation as Dr. Yvonne Kason was now completed. And it was a sense of like a graduation party or a birthday party or a celebration happening on the other side, welcoming me like, well done, you did it, you graduated, you finished this incarnation. And I remember, they have cartoons sometimes where they show you a little devil on your shoulder talking to you.
Right.
So, so I had a little part, I don't know, a little ego, a little devil on my shoulder. I remember instantly having this thought, uh-oh, here comes the life review.
Right. Right.
because by this this point, I'd been researching NDEs for years, and I knew that most people who die completely have a life review. And I mean, I tried to have a good life, but who's perfect? I've made mistakes like everyone else has. And it was so beautiful what happened because the two saints, they could read my thoughts. Like as soon as that, the devil on my shoulder, that thought came out, one of them looked at me and just glanced at me. And there was like this transmission that happened with this glance. It just blew the little devil off my shoulder. And the understanding that came with that glance was so beautiful. What I understood was the higher power, Mother, Father, God, whatever term we understand, the loving intelligence behind the universe, is so profoundly loving and so profoundly understanding that he, she, it gets it, that we make mistakes when we're learning. And just like a loving parent, I know you're a parent of a young child who makes mistakes. They're learning to walk. They stumble, they fall, they break things. Maybe they skin their head. But the loving parent doesn't punish the child. The loving parent consoles the child and comforts the child and says, that's okay. Try again. You can do better next time. And that was the sort of unconditional love I was being welcomed with on the other side. So my heart just let go of any worries and just expanded into feeling that unconditional love and joy and welcome. And then my consciousness sort of shifted. That's the best way I can describe it. That many things about the other side that are very difficult to explain, but it's like a shift happened. And my conscious capacity expanded tremendously. It was like before, if my brain or consciousness was like a Pentium 5, it was now a Pentium 100. And so I was able to absorb vast amounts of information very, very quickly and integrate it very, very quickly, like in a massive download. And I suddenly re-remembered all of my past lives, which I was mentioning before. And in my own spiritual awakening journey while I was incarnated in the first chapter of Dr. Yvonne Kason, I had remembered several of my past lives when it related to, people I was meeting now or in problems I was having. But it was like having pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, that you have a bunch of pieces, but now all the pieces were there and they were all fit together. And there was the whole picture of all of my past lives. And it was like an aha experience and it was also really positive because it was like finally like, yeah, that's who I am. That's me. Like I finally really remembered who I am and my soul's journey over these many incarnations. And and I instantly could see the beauty in it, the beauty in the divine plan. And it's so intricate and it's so beautiful. And if you get stuck on one little piece, you think, oh, this is crappy. I don't like what happened here. But in the context of the whole picture, it all made sense that God's plan is perfect. I call our higher power God. And that there's a happy ending for everybody in the end. I just knew that. I understood it. And another thing that was very remarkable while I was on the other side was my very clear awareness of how time passes differently on the other side.
Right.
And it's sort of like there's no time or all time at the same time on the other side. It was where I would focus my attention would be where I would perceive relative to how we here on earth perceive things. Like I also had very clear understanding how we here on earth perceive time linearly. There's a past, there's a present, and there's a
Right.
future. Whereas on the other side, if I sort of shifted my attention this way, I could be perceiving what we here on earth perceive as the past. And if I would shift my attention again, I would be perceiving what we here in present on earth perceive as the present. When I would shift this way, I would perceive what we here on Earth would perceive as possible futures, because futures always have possibilities because people have a human choice. So there are probabilities and possibilities. Anyway, all of this understanding was phenomenal. And I basked in this state of incredible, some people called it cosmic consciousness. I don't know what to call it. Expanded bliss, peace, love, understanding, knowledge, awareness for a period of timeless time, because there's no sense of time on the other side like we have it here. And then all of a sudden, the two beings of light appeared to me again and telepathically communicated to me, you may now choose
Wow.
either to reincarnate in the form of a baby to further serve the divine, and or to go back to the maimed and injured body in order to further serve. And I was in such an expansive state of consciousness. My heart seemed to be where my responses were coming from, out of my heart, not out of my head, out of my heart. And my heart was in a complete state of love and trust of the higher powers, beautiful divine plan. And my heart instantly responded, oh, masters, please guide me. What is the higher choice? I want to do God's will. And they so lovingly, telepathically communicated to me, it will be more difficult, but to return to the maimed body. And nothing was shown to me of what the difficulties, not that I recall, of what the difficulties were or the challenges. It was just instant. My heart so trusted and was in such a state of surrender and trust. My heart instantly responded, I accept. And it was so fast. It was between the I and the accept. It was that fast where all of a sudden, with a gasp of breath, I found myself back in my body, lying on the ground in Niagara Falls, starting to breathe life into my dead, semi-frozen body, because in winter you cool down pretty fast when you're dead outside.
Yeah.
And so I'm gasping air, and as I'm gasping air into my lungs, lying on the ground with this really serious head injury that I died from, for the first few minutes, seconds, I really don't know because time hadn't quite aligned with Earth yet. I could see both realms superimposed on each other. It was like a double image photograph where both images were completely superimposed on each other. I could see the worldly realm around me, Niagara Falls, the noises, etc. And I could see the white light realm with the beings of light were there with me as I started waking up in my body. And then slowly the white light realm started fading from view until it just became a tiny little point in my consciousness. And then I was back, but I was back in a body that was very seriously disabled with
Yeah.
a traumatic brain injury.
Wow. Okay. One of the things that I do a little bit different on Soul Inspired is I haven't had a near-death experience. I've had spiritual transformative experiences, I guess I would call it, where I seen uh, visual things that don't make sense to our common world.
You're clairvoyant. That's what
Yeah,
that's called.
I had a visual, a co-experience with somebody where we both seen a hand, an operation of a hand appear, and
Awesome.
yeah, it was with someone that I could still relate back and say, did that happen? Because I'm kind of an in-between person where I have a very high belief system in a spiritual connection, but I'm by nature a skeptic and like to know truth, seeking answers. So, but I relate back to my own life experiences sometimes to not to talk about myself in any way, but that other people that are listening in can have experiences throughout their life that don't necessarily need to be NDEs that can give them an indication that we are much bigger than we are. And one of those experiences I had one time was I had gone to bed and I'd had enough. I don't know what was going on in my life. I was probably in my early 20s. And I said, I want proof that I'm bigger than I am. And I don't know what that's going to be, but I need proof. But I also knew I don't probably want an NDE because I'd already been focused in and researching NDEs since my youth. I said, but I want some kind of undeniable proof. And around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up out of my sleep. And I'm still to this day trying to decipher what this was, but it reminded me of some of the way that you spoke about your NDE. And I heard my name spoken with a thunderous roar, so deep and strong that it actually frightened me. It makes the hair on my arms go up because I was consciously awaking from something. And at the time, the person I was with, I, oh my gosh, like out of fear, just panic and fear. What is this sound? But it was so loud that it scared me. It scared my human. Okay.
Mhm.
And I guess I bring it up because you spoke, but you see, when you had your experiences hearing, but you were in an ND, you had your physical body was starting to cease, right? You started to kind of go into or you were about to go to that place. And I wanted to know, the question was, did you have fear around it? Because I'm trying to understand why I had a fear around that. Or was it maybe something I was just, wow, I really got what I asked for?
Well, what I would say is this. With my near-death experiences, all of them, like the plane crash, yes, I had fear as the plane was going down, as I saw the plane crashing. But then when my NDE started, the fear went away. The fear went away. And from my research, that's a very common thing with near-death experiences, is that the fear and the pain go away. Now, if you ask me about other types of spiritually transformative experiences that I've had, um, do I have any, say, past life memories where I'm very aware that I was, say like when I was being burned at a stake in a past life memory? Yeah, there was fear and trauma associated with that memory. Um, and have there been experiences in this lifetime that I have found stimulated fear? Yeah, there have been a few, but they've not been my near-death experiences. My own personal experiences that produced a certain amount of fear in me were psychic phenomena. Certain psychic phenomena, like when I told you when I was a kid and I could see ghosts, I was scared of those ghosts.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that they actually did anything to harm me, but the ego part of myself was scared of what I was seeing.
Right.
And so, in transdimensional experiences, maybe this hand coming out was a transdimensional experience. I don't know. That sometimes people will be quite frightened by them. It's like what was that? That's
Yeah.
scary to me. So yeah, psychic experiences can create fear, but various types of mystical experiences, including near-death experiences, generally there's no fear associated with them. In fact, it's the opposite. Fear
Right.
dissolves. Yeah.
Fear dissolves and love is the most common factor within them. I'm seeing that as well. And I think you're right. I think likely in both my experiences, whether I saw the apparition of the hand or that night when I woke up and heard the thunder, it was thunderous is the only way. It didn't sound like a voice you'd hear in this realm.
Hmm.
And I think my ego checked immediately online and was absolutely frightened and thought,
Hmm.
wow, that's either my higher self or a godly self of something that I can't comprehend. And that kind of, but it was enough. I was like, okay, thank you.
Hmm.
I asked, I received, thank you. I think I have a very sensitive incarnation here. I don't know. It was just enough for me to handle. But until the way that you were talking earlier, the way that you were saying, be still and know that I'm with you, those type of direct, that was kind of what I felt with, I heard Joe, Like
Mhm.
it was and they used my name because I would recognize it, or I did, or whatever. And it was just an odd experience. And I have never mentioned it on this show, but I always kind of give little sprinkles of things I've had in my life that have led me to where I am right now.
Mhm.
You also mentioned that a massive shift happened in that 2003 moment when you went to this upgrade, this, you said like a Pentium upgrade, and you were able to see all the downloads of previous lives, all these things, right? And you finally remembered who you were. And immediately I thought, could this be sometimes why a lot of us are walking around feel lost? Because we haven't completely tapped into that higher self. Do you believe that? Or do you think that there's something more to it? I just wondered, because that's the first thing that came to me.
Well, maybe. I mean, there can be many reasons why people feel lost. I think people tend to feel most lost, in my experience, when they haven't reconnected with their spiritual self yet, when they haven't realized that they're truly a spiritual being having this experience in the body, that they're more than just the body,
Right,
right?
right,
And 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 I think a lot of people are searching, even though they don't realize that they're searching, some of them, to discover that they're truly spiritual beings. And once people have had, I'm going to call it their spiritual awakening, because my organization that I'm the president of is called Spiritual Awakenings International. People More and more people around the world are having spiritual awakenings. And I think this is the time of the great awakening on the planet. And more people are having them, and near death experiences are part of that. But as people are awakening, I think that they're addressing that question of who am I? Why am I here? And they gradually get less confused and start feeling more comfortable in their own skin. But it's a journey. I mean, it's not like you have your awakening and suddenly you have all the answers to the universe. No, it's not
right,
like that at all.
right.
It's like, at least you know where to start searching now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, if anything, it could cause more questions at times, because you're
yeah.
questioning what you've done up to
Hmm.
this point, what's
Hmm.
coming, all those
Hmm.
types of things. Yeah,
Exactly, but at least you're on a quest. Like now you've got a purpose. You're on a quest. Even
that's
if you
right.
don't have the answers, you know that you're on a quest.
Absolutely. And you obviously had some answers given to you. I mean, I know you've had five NDEs, but in that last one, the question of, for you at least in your life experience, it seems like the question of reincarnation was somewhat
Like
given to
it's
you.
like locked. It's like
Right, right.
absolutely we reincarnate.
Yeah,
And and people have asked me, well, have you been a man? Have you been a woman? Have you been white? Have you been black? Have you been brown? Have you been purple? All of the above. It's sort of
yeah,
like in the infinite beauty of the divine higher plan. Like there's just so many different experiences our souls go through in order to learn and grow and to contribute to this beautiful mosaic that is life, not only on this planet but on many planets in many dimensions. I mean, it's much bigger than we thought.
right.
uh,
Right. And like you said, it could be divinely planned that way, that we don't know how big it is because we're not supposed to. I I feel personally that the veil, whatever we want to call it, you know, you at a
Veil's a good word.
I would say the veil to me feels like it is, I wouldn't say thinning. Maybe we're becoming more aware, but maybe it is thinning. I look at what happened to you when you were young and you started seeing spirit easier. The way that I would see that is that when you came back, that veil really had thinned out for you and you were able to see things for a while until you consciously just became more aware of this life. That's just the way I'm interpreting it. I'm not
Yeah,
meaning
I
to
would
say.
say there was a big hole in the veil.
Ah, right, right. So,
Like,
okay.
oh,
Yeah. And that could be scary. That could be fearful, especially for
for a
someone who's
child,
not, for a
yeah, for a
child, or
child, yeah.
for
Hmm.
adults too, if you're not used to it. But I think as if it can gradually thin a little bit as we see our higher self, our higher purpose, I believe it's happening. The reason I say that is because I look at the way technology is now and the way that somebody can listen to this episode, this show, it can be put all over the place and it can awaken in people, right? These ideas,
Yes, absolutely.
the companies and the organizations that are growing like yourself, where people are actually having these deep conversations, which 150 years ago, even 100 years ago, probably would have put you on the stake, you know.
Yep.
Yep. So we couldn't talk like this back then. And so I think it's amazing that these things have changed. Besides the spiritualconference.com or sorry, .org, spiritualconference.org. Do you have a website yourself that people can contact
Yeah,
you?
spiritualawakeningsinternational.org is our website where they can go and learn about our upcoming events and all the definitions. I have pages up there of definitions for various types of spiritually transformative experiences. That's all taken from my books. After I want to mention before we get to a close today, which is that I was very seriously disabled for 12 years from the traumatic brain injury in 2003. But in February 24th, 2016, I experienced a miracle. I was deep in meditation in a holy spot in Encinitas, California, a spot where Paramahansa Yogananda used to meditate and commune with God. I'm very sensitive to the vibrations of holy spots, so I like to go and meditate there. I was meditating and I experienced inwardly an eruption of light in the center of my brain. And I had this subjective experience that felt like waking up, like the center of my brain had been asleep for 12 years since my brain injury and now woke up. And I
Wow.
got the very strong inner guidance, pass on what you have learned. And it was like floodgates opened in my consciousness, and all the ideas for my next books that I was going to write were just flowing through my consciousness. So I just want to show this is the first book I wrote after. Can you see it?
Yep. Touched by the light.
After my brain healing. And in this book, it's like a synthesis of all my many years of work, over 100 case stories of people having different types of spiritually transformative experiences, which is a term that I coined. And then after that, I immediately wrote this, which is my most recent book, Soul Lessons from the Light. And this is my story. I'm trying to get it to come into view here. This is my story. This is my spiritual awakening story, where I have my 5 near-death experiences, my miraculous healing experience. And then after I wrote these books, it was like Spirit said, okay, got a download. We want you to launch a new organization, Spiritual Awakenings International. And
Wow.
so I did. And that's now helping people all over the world find a safe place where they can learn about diverse types of spiritually transformative experiences. They can meet other experiencers online, hear other people's stories. But it's all normalizing this because I believe, as I mentioned earlier, we are at the time in human history of the Great Awakening. And modern technology is actually part of it because you're right. It's like you can go online and you can research near-death experiences, Kundalini awakening, spiritual awakenings. It's all there. I mean, we have a YouTube channel, we're on TikTok, we're on Facebook, we're on X, and you can have discussions about spiritual awakening all over media.
I love it. And that's exactly what I mean. I mean, it's just so easy to access now, and people aren't. I mean, there's still some people who would, question a lot of these things, but we should. Everything should be questioned. I don't have a problem with that as long as everyone is treating everybody well and good along their own personal journey of awakening.
Mhm.
And again, I want to mention just one more time again, it's Saturday, June 7th to June 8th is the conference you're putting on. And yeah, I hope
Online, online,
online.
and it's
It's
free.
free and it's spiritualconference.org.
That
So
is
sign up for
correct.
that. This has been a really amazing conversation. I end every single soul inspired episode asking the same question. It could be a one sentence answer, whatever comes to you. Why are we here?
I can tell you that in 2 sentences. The purpose of life is to find God and realize our true spiritual nature.
Wow. And we do that, like I said earlier, with a little bit of a memory. We don't remember the other side. So it's almost like we come here and the journey is leading back. It's a
Hmm.
very interesting concept, right? Come
Hmm.
here forgotten, forgetting. Although there are different NDEs out there. There's kids that come in and by the age 2 they start telling about their past life. Like you see these
Exactly. They
sometimes,
still
right?
remember.
It's still
Yeah.
incredible when you see stuff like that. So
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. I would encourage anyone to check out Yvonne Kason online and check out all the stuff you're doing. It's been amazing just having this conversation. And I always tell the people of Soul Inspired to continue to like, share, and subscribe. This show just hit 6,000 subscribers just yesterday, so I'm really excited to announce that. I love just seeing it kind of keep moving and people are sharing these conversations. So even though we're still in our infancy as a podcast, it's still getting to people out there. So thank you so
Awesome.
much for being on the
All
show. I
right.
really appreciate it.
And thank you for having me, Joe.
So